Today we're going to show you how to put a Yamaha Drive G29 long travel kit on a cart. You need to jack the cart up, remove the wheels and tires, remove the front body, the stock front bumper, and the roof, and save all this for reinstallation. And then the first step, using 17mm wrench and ratchet, you want to remove the cotter pin that's holding the tie rod ends on both sides of the car. You want to loosen this. Take the tie rod end out of the steering arm on both the driver and passenger side. The next step is to remove the hubs from both the driver and passenger side. Simply just pop off the dust cover, remove the cotter pin, and then with a 19mm socket, remove the nut that's holding the hub to the car. You want to save this hardware for reinstallation. The next step is to remove the strut and A-arm assembly using 14mm bolts, the top shock bolt, and the inner A-arm bolts. Now you want to save the inner A-arm bolts for reinstallation. Now we need to remove the stock tie rod ends from both the driver and passenger side using a 17mm wrench on the jam nut and a 19mm wrench on the tie rod end. You want to break the jam nut loose and remove the tie rod ends from both the driver and passenger side. These will not be reused, but the jam nuts will. Now, taking the supplied tie rod extension, notice that there's a knurl on each one. This goes towards the outside of the cart. You want to thread that on the stock tie rod. Now you want to take the supplied jam nut, its left-hand thread, and install on the supplied tie rod end, and then install the tie rod end to the tie rod extension as shown. Do not securely tighten at this time, because we will set the toe and then securely tighten once the lift kit's installed. Now we want to install the subframe to the car. You want to slide it up into the stock channel as shown, and then using the supplied 3/8x1 bolts, washers, and lock nuts, you want to install this to the car. Now that we have the subframe securely installed, using the two bottom holes in the subframe as a guide, you want to drill up through the subframe and the channel of the frame of the cart on both the driver and passenger side. Now that you have the holes drilled, securely tighten the subframe to the frame of the car using the supplied 3/8x1 bolts, washers, and lock nuts. Now we want to install the J plate to the stock top shock mount holes using the supplied 3/8x1 bolts, washers, and lock nuts as shown, and securely tighten. The next step is to drill a hole in the driver's side and passenger side of the frame using the holes in the J plate as a guide, and then securely tighten using the supplied 3/8x1 bolts, washers, and lock nuts. Now we're going to install the bottom A-arms to the subframe. They are not side specific, but what you want to make sure is that the shock mount holes are going up. Slide it into the subframe channel as shown and securely tighten using the supplied 3/8x3 bolts and lock nuts to the front and rear mount, to both driver and passenger side. The next step is to install the top A-arms. These are also not size specific, but you want to make sure that the spud for the heim is going down. And you want to install it to the stock A-arm hole as shown using the stock upper A-arm bolts and securely tighten with the stock lock nuts. Now we're going to install the spindles to the car. We are looking at the passenger side. They are side specific. The steering arm will go up. And we're going to install it to the top and bottom A-arms using the supplied 1/2 by 7.5 and Heim spacers. You can see the cone of the Heim spacer goes towards the Heim, down through the spindle, down through the bottom A-arm, and then the cone of the bottom Heim spacer goes to the Heim, with the flat end going to the lock nut, and securely tighten both driver and passenger side. Now we're going to install the bottom of the shocks to the bottom A-arms using the supplied 7/16 by 5 bolt and tapered spacers for the front and back side of the shock. Securely install the shock to the bottom A-arm of both the driver and passenger side. Now we're going to install the top of the shock. There's 2 hole locations, a bottom hole or a top hole, just for different height settings. Using the supplied 7/16 by 3 bolt, washer, and tapered spacer behind the shock with the small end of the taper towards the shock. Securely tighten the shock to the top shock mount. Now we're going to install the tie rod ends to the steering arms of the spindle using the supplied 17 millimeter lock nut, and securely tighten both driver and passenger side as shown. Now the lift kit is installed. You want to install your stock hubs using the stock hardware and your wheels and tires. What we're going to show you now is the adjustments in the lift kit. You can adjust your toe of the cart by loosening the jam nuts and either lengthening or shortening the tie rods to the driver and passenger side. Once you have it set correctly, you want the toe to be towed in approximately 1/8 to 1/4 inch. Just remember when you're done to retighten the jam nuts. And also, the camber is completely adjustable. You can run these in or out, both top and bottom, to get whatever setting you want. And just again, make sure once you have the proper alignment, you retighten the jam nuts. And the lift kit is done, and you can reinstall your stock bumper, the body, the roof, and everything's good to go, and you can move to the rear. Now we're going to move to the rear of the car. We still got it up on jack stands, and you want to take a regular car jack and put it underneath the rear differential. And we have the body off this car. Again, you do not have to have the body off to install the lift, but using 14 millimeter ratchet and wrenches, remove the bolts that are holding the top of the shocks to the car, both the driver and passenger side. You want to save these bolts for reinstallation. The next step, using a 17 millimeter ratchet and wrench, you're going to remove the bolt that's holding the sway bar to the car. The next step is enlarging the stock hole in the frame, and you want to use a 3/8 inch drill bit and drill down completely through the frame. This is going to allow you to bolt the sway bar mount to the car. The next step is, with the car jack, drop the rear end. And we're going to install the rear goal posts to the top stock shock mount location using the supplied 3/8 by 2 bolts and lock nuts. There's a marking on the goal post. This J goes towards the rear of the car. And securely tighten. Now that you have the goalpost in place, you want to install the top of the stock shocks to the new top shock mount. You can see we installed heavy duty coils on this car, and we highly recommend putting them on any Yamaha. Securely tighten when you're done, and we're going to move to the sway bar mount. Now we're going to install the sway bar mount
You want to put the supplied 3/8 by 3 down through the hole that you enlarged.
And then we're going to install the sway bar to the stock sway bar location. Now this hole here we're putting a 1/2 by 1. Some models will need that stock frame hole enlarged. And the last step is with the stock bolt, install the sway bar to the new sway bar mount as shown. When you have it done, securely tighten, and the lift kit is done, go back through and make sure that all bolts are securely tightened and all cotter pins are reinstalled.
On all Yamaha drives, when you install a larger wheel and tire, you have to trim this pointed edge off of the rocker panel. Now you can do this while it's on the car, but we're installing a new body on this car, so it's just as easy for us to do it off the car. And what we did is we followed the line, and we're just going to simply come down and we're going to cut off the edge to allow us to put the taller tire on. This is the passenger side. You do this to both the driver and passenger side. Simply just clean up the excess end and it looks just like factory.